My name is Charmaine Letourneau.
I wanted to talk about some of my memories at Gallaudet. I had never even heard of Gallaudet when I was a student at the Alberta School for the Deaf. We, I was told there was teachers of the deaf that had graduated there. I think at first I thought, well, to be a teacher, and they said, yeah, you can do that. Go and be a teacher at Gallaudet. And I thought, well, where is Gallaudet? They showed me where it was, showed me the yearbook, provided me some information, and that you have an opportunity to become a teacher. And many of the hearing teachers had really encouraged me to attend Gallaudet, but I kept thinking, boy, it's so far from home. And they continued to push me, and so I made the decision to actually go to Gallaudet. Well, when I arrived on campus, I was in culture shock. It was huge. There was signing everywhere. And my first initial reaction, I thought maybe the sign language would be different, the dialects would be different. But no, I understood people and I could communicate, and was such an overwhelming experience. Now I was provided with 24/7 sign language communication, not like growing up in a hearing family and not signing. And I was excited, I met friends, I attended classes. And one of my most favorite times at Gallaudet was always after supper time. When supper was completed, we'd all head over to the student body lounge. And we always had lots of lively debates there. Sometimes I didn't know how to debate. I mean, I had no idea. I was never taught when I was attending school. But my mind just blew open. Every debate, every conversation, every viewpoint, it was like the world was collapsing inside my head and blowing it up. I was enjoying things. I was learning new terminology, things I didn't know before. I was learning how to debate. I was learning how to figure out, if that perspective was clearly identified versus another one. It was such a rich experience. And as a result of that, I became a good leader here in Canada. I think if I had not attended Gallaudet, I may not have had those skills. But they gave me all of those skills and so many things they offered me. I'm very grateful to Gallaudet and for what it gave me as a teacher now, as a retiree, as a leader. I fought for many rights for the deaf community as well as addition to other deaf community members, but I'm grateful to Gallaudet, and I'm grateful to people like you who are part of my life.
Hello there. My name is Sarah Snively, and I'm a graduate of the Alberta School for the Deaf, the class of 2005. I would like to share a few things today with you about Charmaine. My family moved to Edmonton from Calgary when my mom realized that I was deaf. She knew that the best place for my education would be at the Alberta School for the Deaf, and so I became a student at ASD. Charmaine was a teacher at the time and one of the greatest role models in my life. I admired her as a mentor who taught me so much, not only in school, but out in the community as well. My mom worried a lot about me and what the future would hold for me as a deaf child. She asked Charmaine if I would be okay, and Charmaine's response was quite simply, "Look at me, I'm great, and your daughter will be just fine." And she was right. I had Charmaine in my life, and she was a wonderful person, a beacon of light, really. And it's not that I was stuck by her side all the time, but she was present and there, whether it be in the classroom, as vice principal, as a substitute teacher, and as a community member. She was active in the deaf organizations, and I always felt that Charmaine saw something in me that most overlooked. It was Charmaine that brought out the best of me by encouraging me to step up, be involved, and take on a leadership role. She shared her torch, her flame and passion with me and many others. And for all of this, I am truly grateful, and I will continue to pave the way to do my part, just as she did.
Hi there, my name is Camel. I graduated from ASD, Alberta School for the Deaf, in 2013. And when I look back when I first met Charmaine, it was when I was in first grade. And that was at ASD here in 2001. I remember going to the deaf school and being introduced to the teachers, and then the teacher wanted to introduce me to the assistant principal. And that was over in the old building, where the old offices were. And I remember seeing Charmaine Letourneau on the door, and there was a woman sitting there. And she asked me, "What's your name?" And I said, "Oh, my name is Camel, and this is my sign name." And she said, "Oh yeah, my name is Charmaine." And I remember being so amazed by her because she was a deaf vice principal, and I've never seen a deaf person in that type of position. And so she wanted to know more about me, and I introduced myself, and she said, "Wow, you're such a smart kid. You can do so much, you know." And that was in grade 1, and I carried that with me for many years. So, and I remember going into math class after that, and I wanted to really impress Charmaine because she had inspired me, and I wanted to show her my work. So I did categorize the old number cubes by tens, and I did that, and I brought it to her office. And I went in, and she asked me what was going on, and I wanted to show her the math I did, and she was like, "Oh, I'm so impressed with you. You're a really smart kid." And that comment I will never forget. And then I remember she retired as the vice principal, and then as the years went on, it was grade 7, I believe, there was the teacher we had had to leave for medical reasons, so we had a sub, and Charmaine was with us for a year. So I remember it being the first week of school in September, and everyone introduced themselves, and then she gave out homework to everyone. And myself, I did not like doing homework. I would always play and rest and not do my schoolwork. And then I remember that evening, the assignment was due the next day, and I never did the assignment that night. And it was the next day, and Charmaine asked everyone if they did their homework. And those students who said no, she would read them out. And I remember getting very nervous about that when it was going to be my turn, and I wasn't sure if I should tell her the truth or lie. So I tried lying and said, "Yeah, I did my homework." And then she said, "Oh, really? Okay, let's see it." And then I was kind of caught off guard by that, and then I actually admitted I didn't do my homework, I forgot it. And then she was very direct with me and said, "Don't lie. Like, do your homework. Like, you're a smart kid. You can do this." And I remember being really embarrassed by that. And from then on in, I did my homework and finished everything, and my habits changed, and I thank her for that. If I never had met her, I may have continued my old bad habits. So yeah, she really made an impact on me. And I remember meeting her out in the community after several times. She supported me going to deaf youth camps and conferences, and I want to thank her so much. If I never had met her, I think I would have been a different person. And I want to thank her so much for everything she's done for me. She was strong, she was wise, disciplined. Thank you very much. Hi there, my name is Kyle Badry. I graduated here at Alberta School for the Deaf in 2003. I remember when I first came in 1996 to the school. Before that, I was in a different school. I was in a mainstream school, and my sign language wasn't the greatest. I was kind of awkward and had a lot of English signs. And Charmaine was somebody I'd never met before, and she had a very different signing style. Very different from what I learned growing up in school. And I remember Charmaine, she, looking up to her quite a bit. And she taught me so many different things that I will never forget. And one thing I was so impressed with was when she received the Order of Canada. And it was the first deaf woman to ever receive this award. And I remember just being so amazed by that. I was also part of the project that we worked on with the Charmaine and the school staff. It was focused on developing the technology, the deaf network on site. And I remember at that time we had first developed it was called the Deaf News. And the name we had for it was Eagle TV News, and we would play it every morning before class started. And I was part of this project, and Charmaine, gave me that opportunity and to partake. And a lot of the students and staff really enjoyed watching Eagle News before class started. It was very inspirational for everyone, and it was. I thank Charmaine for that opportunity again, for me to develop those skills. I also want to thank Charmaine for other things as well. She made me become a successful person after I graduated. And I say that because Charmaine, she suggested I take a program called RAP, and it's a registered apprenticeship program, is what it's called, for those students in high school that were in grades 10 to 12. And she thought I should take this program before I went into NAIT. And this program was only for those students in high school. And so I ended up, going to 3 different schools. I went to ASD, JP, and also the Metro Community College. And I took various courses at those schools. And if Charmaine was never part of my life, I don't know if I would have ever been successful in taking those courses, and maybe I'd be doing something completely different, maybe living on the street or something like that. I'll never forget her. I can't thank her enough. I want to thank her so much for the success of my career, and I looked up to her so much throughout that time. And now that I've graduated, and after I graduated, I started seeing Charmaine in the community because she saw that I was very involved in the deaf community. I was part of the Edmonton Association of the Deaf and also the Alberta Association of the Deaf, and I did a lot of work and was very involved in those organizations, and Charmaine recognized that. And so, I used to look up to her growing up in school, and then she started looking up to me because I was so involved, and now Charmaine's gone. And she's somebody I'm never going to forget. Thank you.
You know that most information that's provided about deaf people or the deaf community are in huge books, quite voluminous. And so Kathy and I had this discussion on how we could create a small booklet that could incorporate the same information. So we started to create a book called Deaf People Are Just Like You, But. And obviously there are some cultural differences. And so we developed that small booklet. We published many copies. We provided it to ASL classes, ASL immersion classes, medical practitioners, doctors' offices. So the information was circulated to tutors, all kinds of people in the community. And it was provided free of charge. The first project was under the Canadian Cultural Society for the Deaf, CCSD, and a few years later we realized that the information in the booklet had now become outdated. There was no more services of using a TTY, and now were using video relay services, so we decided to update the book and make some revisions. Now the second booklet was sponsored by the Alberta Cultural Society for the Deaf, so ACSD. and it became part of their project. Deaf people are just like you, but we also created a poetry competition. And we collected a variety of poetry from various community members. Kathy and I had a chance to review them, and we thought there's a lot of valuable information in here. So we selected the best entries, both Kathy and I, and we devised a new booklet called The Sounds of the Soul, an anthology of poetry by deaf Canadians. And, you know, I tutored for many, many, many years. And I actually made my students read the poetry. And many times it really elicited a lot of emotional responses from the students who read the entries. They could feel their experience about impression. So anyways, it was a very good book, and you know, there were tears and everything. So in total, the projects were really a lot of fun. They were very successful for the CCSD, and I really look forward to looking at the new generation to have something successful. Hello, I'm Helen Pizzacalla, and I am from Ontario. The Canadian Cultural Society for the Deaf is the national organization where I first learned about Charmaine Letourneau. I met her at one of the annual general meeting conferences in Montreal, where the National Federation of the Arts celebration was being held in 1986. I have to tell you, I was awestruck. It's kind of like, you know, when people have an opportunity to meet their famous hockey player, whether that be Wayne Gretzky or Sidney Crosby. That's how I reacted to Charmaine. Totally awestruck. She had the ability to run a meeting seamlessly. Other experiences and other organizations that I attended meetings to tended to have lots of disagreement and lots of arguments around choices of English regarding motions. Charmaine made our motions in American Sign Language, and she had the secretary make those motions in English. She was very straightforward. She wasn't comical by any means. Business was business. And I learned a great deal from her and how she conducted meetings. She had been president of the Canadian Cultural Society for the Deaf for about 6 years. And then in 1991, she was serving her 4th term as president. And that's when I joined the CCSD board as vice president. I was nervous to say, the icon of Charmaine Letourneau, boy, I sure was not her equal. And back in 1991, we didn't have email or technology, internet services where we could communicate with each other. And deaf people typically would communicate with one another by fax or with the TTY. I mean, we're talking about over 30 years ago. Both Charmaine and I would correspond by letter. She would send me a letter, I would send it to her. Once in a while, we would send each other faxes. The first time that I got a letter from Charmaine was probably just prior to June of 1991. And it was a letter congratulating me and welcoming me to the CCSD board. I felt like a VIP. She knew how to treat people, and she knew how to make people feel good. And she signed it. I loved her handwriting. For the next 6 years, as I was president, well, I actually ran for 12 years, I would continue to see correspondence from her with her signature. Charmaine stayed on the executive committee, and a lot of the executive committee members at the time were from Edmonton, Alberta. I was the one that was the long-distance member from Ontario, but Charmaine would always keep me apprised of what was going on within the organization. She always would allocate duties to me. She knew that I was very experienced with the National Festival of Arts. I worked as well with the National Festival of Arts in Ontario, the NFO. So the current name was now called the Canada Deaf Festival. That was a new terminology that was established in Vancouver, British Columbia in 1992. So Charmaine knew that I would love doing that. It really empowered me, and so she delegated that duty to me. I went to various meetings and conferences, and I gained a lot of knowledge. Charmaine always kept in mind about having a succession plan. When I would attend the regular meetings, I could really see that that job really took a lot of skills. Who had the knowledge to do audits, work with the Canada Revenue Agency, look at funding or publishing books, looking at the dictionary of ASL, doing the contract work. Charmaine really was an expert in all those areas, and I thought, who could replace her? But she, was very patient. She continued running from 1980 to 86, and she gently encouraged me and nudged me to become president. And sure enough, I became president, but no longer was she running a meeting. No longer was I getting those handwritten letters from her. But we were doing fine because she stayed on the board for another 6 years just to ensure that the ASL dictionary was going to be printed. And in 2002, when she left the board, I couldn't imagine the CCSD without her. But we progressed because she sent positive vibes. Her contributions for many years allowed for that succession planning to be effective, and we learned a great deal from her. After that, we would see each other once occasionally in the community. And then fast forward to the year 2020, which is the year I served my last term with the CCSD. I had spent 30 years in the organization. And I realized with our younger generation that they didn't know some of the history. And so Charmaine Letourneau, Angela Strati, myself, and Christine Spink-Mitchells decided that we would do some orientation training. And so I met with Angela and with Charmaine and Christine in the fall of 2021, and it was so great to see Charmaine again. I was still awestruck in seeing Charmaine, even though she had, finished her volunteering with us. She was still active, tutoring, mentoring, still sharing stories and folklore. And so I got a chance to videotape some of her stories, as well as Angela Strati, and in addition, Christine Spink-Mitchell. I really want to thank Charmaine for her contributions. She really was a role model for deaf Canadians, including myself. Her love, her passion, her joy, her laughter. She always used to like to laugh at herself. And I miss her laugh, and I miss chatting with her. Thank you, Charmaine, for your incredible contributions to the deaf community in Canada. We love you. I'd like to make 3 comments in relation to Charmaine Letourneau. Charmaine Letourneau was inducted as an honorary member of the Canadian Cultural Society for the Deaf for her many years of contributions to CCSD. She saw it right from the beginning and contributed to the ideas to the organization it is today. Secondly, there is the Charmaine Letourneau Award, which awards a high school student who specializes in arts or sign language or storytelling. Once they're recognized, they're awarded the Charmaine Letourneau Award in addition to a cash prize. And thirdly, Charmaine has supported the Deaf Cultural Center for many years. When I originally brought up the idea, she could see that this would really benefit the youth and come to fruition. And she supported DCC by contributing monthly. The Deaf Cultural Center is very successful and still standing, and again is under the auspices of the Canadian Cultural Society for the Deaf. We've always looked to Charmaine for her leadership and her support. If she believes in you, you can do anything.
My name is Christine Spink Mitchell. I'd like to share some fond memories about Charmaine. I first met Charmaine at the Mackay School for the Deaf in Montreal. We were 3 years apart in age. I was 5 and she was 8. I hadn't known her all that well at that time. And it really wasn't until 1956, when the Alberta School for the Deaf opened in Edmonton, that I really got to know Charmaine. It was here that I became attentive and enamored by Charmaine's ability to tell stories. I would always ask her to tell more, and she gladly obliged. She was such a great storyteller. Every evening I would ask her, "Can you tell us another story?" Sometimes she couldn't, but I would always ask, and I will always remember her for the stories that she told us. At the time when we were in school, the government didn't provide any financial support to go to Gallaudet. I thought Charmaine certainly should go, but she didn't think that she would. I reminded her of what an opportunity that it would have been as a leader of our community, and I urged her to go. She was quite adamant that she wasn't going to attend Gallaudet, and I remember holding on to a bunch of pencils and breaking them one by one. This took her back, and she said, "Okay, fine. If I go, will you go when it's your time?" I promised that I would go, so she decided she would go to Gallaudet. Our classmates waited with anticipation for updates on how she was doing, and we were so thrilled to know that she was acing all of her classes. We would ask the teacher if there was any news of Charmaine, and when news came, we were elated. Her success meant that I could be successful too. But I ended up leaving school for hairdressing at that time. Charmaine understood that that's where I was at. However, I held fast to my promise, and when I was done hairdressing school, I went to Gallaudet and I completed my master's degree. Charmaine was astonished, but I said to her, "Remember, a promise is a promise." And it was because of her that I knew I could do it. Charmaine was such a great influence, and she always said, "Why not? Let's just give it a try. What have we got to lose? Just try." We all know Charmaine had a strong personality. She held fast to her convictions. She loved a debate and a challenge. And if I said something to her and she wasn't convinced of it, and I went on and said, "This is what I know," she would do her research until she was proven wrong, or until she found accurate information that she would share with us. She never relied on hearsay, but rather followed the facts. That taught me the value of not succumbing to what others say, but to seek out accurate information. And she often reminded me how important that was. Oh, I remember a funny story Charmaine told me once. You know, she attended so many meetings to advocate and fight for the rights of deaf people, education, and so much more. The only thing that Charmaine couldn't stand was a long, drawn-out meeting. So when she had had about enough, her little secret way of concluding a meeting was to bring her purse up onto the table. And when she did this, everyone got the hint, and the meeting was wrapped up immediately. She was so clever. Some people thought Charmaine was a in-your-face kind of person. But little did they know she had such a huge, huge heart. She was generous and giving no matter the need. Anything that anybody needed or wanted, She was ready to give. She was an extremely kind woman. Charmaine never complained. She was always thinking about other people. She never dwelled on herself, what might be going on for her own health. She always thought about others before herself and didn't boast or brag about her own accomplishments. Even in her last days before Charmaine passed away, she continued her allegiance to the deaf community as she worked on bylaw revisions and whatnot. She was more than willing and happy to contribute with all of her heart. The deaf community, myself included, will greatly miss Charmaine. I'm grateful to her for her leadership, and I know that we will all miss her. My name is Angela Patrone Strati. I'm honored to share some of my fond memories of Charmaine Letourneau today with you. I first met Charmaine in 1965 at Gallaudet University. We were the graduating class of 1970. We had some good memories, but one of my fondest memories that I will never forget has to do with a prank. If you will, allow me to explain. At that time, Gallaudet had two separate dormitories, one being the Krug dorm and the other being the Cogswell dorm. The Krug dorm was for the male students and Cogswell was for the female students. The dorms were both accessed by the same door, which led into a foyer and a spiral staircase in the middle, from where one could see each floor from above, all the way up to the 4th floor. Just as the photo shows, you have an idea of what this looked like. So back to the prank. At the time, it was exam week and students were studying, preparing for exams. I had come out of my room only to see the spiral staircase wrapped in toilet paper, strings and strings of it cascading down from the staircase. It's quite beautiful if you see by the photo. Stunning, right? So, Elizabeth Benson, who was our Dean of Women at the time, she was the first female lieutenant of the Women's Army Corps during World War II. She was also an interpreter and had interpreted for 2 American presidents, John F. Kennedy and Lyndon B. Johnson. Elizabeth had told Charmaine that an assembly of the girls in the dormitory was required. At that time, Charmaine was a senior and was the representative of the Women's Recreation Association. So, as instructed, she called us to gather on the 1st floor of the building. Charmaine ascended the stairs to the platform, as you'll see in this picture. And stood there with her hands on her hips, glaring at all of us. We were stunned and intimidated, to say the least. She stood with hands on hips and says, "I'm here to address the toilet paper." Hands right back on her hips, and she glared at all of us. She followed with a, "Who did it?" Nobody was admitting their involvement. And then she said, "What is the logical reason for doing so?" Again, her hands on her hips. We all looked at each other, and that word stuck for us, logical. Anyway, that's been with me for many years. Nobody admitted participating in the toilet paper prank, and nothing came of it, imminently. But not long after, we all received a letter with a $1 fine for the toilet paper incident. And Charmaine had to pay it too. After we graduated, Charmaine went back to Edmonton, and I went back to Winnipeg. During 1984, Charmaine, along with Dave Mason, took a very active role in the Alberta Association of the Deaf. Together, they lobbied and advocated for the deaf community and were involved in many different projects. One of those was establishing the interpreter training program in Edmonton. I had moved to Edmonton in 1986 and was reunited with Charmaine. I was thrilled to be working with her again. I worked within the interpreter training program, and Charmaine was on the advisory committee for the full 16 years that I was with the program. I've been afforded such rich experiences working with Charmaine. We worked together for the Canadian Cultural Society of the Deaf, and as the former president of CCSD, I handed off many developing projects pertaining to history, ASL, the Sign Language Instructors of Canada, Deaf Women's Conference, and most recently, the Literacy Project. I'm so honored and proud to have worked with Charmaine. I truly cherish her, and I miss her. But, although she's gone, maybe she had her own logical reason. I love you, Charmaine. Hello, I'm Kathy Dolby. I would first like to extend my heartfelt condolences and sympathies to you all. If you're watching me now, it means that you knew Charmaine and how much she cherished you and deaf people everywhere. I've known Charmaine for 46 years. However, Charmaine was initially guarded in her trust of me as a hearing person for probably about the first year. But after that, we became lifelong best of friends for the next 45 years. Charmaine was a born leader, quite literally a born leader. From the time that she was a babe in arms, she was already a leader. It's true. Her family told me time and time again that Charmaine always got what she wanted. And in fact, they were a little envious of that. As we look around the world today, how many good leaders can we truly say that we admire? There are not many. A good leader is strong in their beliefs, determined to persevere, regardless of what challenges they may be facing. Charmaine wasn't just a good leader. She was a superlative leader. Charmaine just had this magical way of getting things done, taking action that led to success and achieving what she wanted for all of us. In all honesty, I think we all know that Charmaine had a reputation for being bossy. But if we ever accused her of being bossy, she would deny it full-heartedly and then follow it by a sheepish little smile. I think she really wanted us to consider that she was the boss. And with that, I decided to buy this little gift for Charmaine. And when Charmaine saw it, she smiled brightly and she said, "Right!" She couldn't have agreed more. But at the same time, Charmaine was a very sensitive and compassionate person. She was always giving back and contributing, whether it be to organizations of the deaf or others, people and animals that needed something. And she was an amazing teacher, really a teacher par excellence. She and I team taught language arts classes at the Alberta School for the Deaf for a couple of years. And it never felt like work, but rather a daily learning party because it was just so much fun. The students were always making great progress, and Charmaine and I were learning from each other about how to improve our teaching techniques. Charmaine could be quite a stickler for details over the littlest, simplest things. As an example, if I told her I was going to stop by her place at 3 o'clock, but I arrived at 2:55, instead of Charmaine saying hello, she'd say, "Why are you early?" Or if I arrived, at 3:05, when I said I was going to be there at 3, she would promptly greet me with a, "Why are you late?" For 40 years, I endured the wrath of Charmaine about my arrival times until I finally wised up. So, after that, whenever she asked what time I would be coming, I would say, "Charmaine, I have no idea. I have several things to do on my way, so I don't know what time I'm going to get your place." And then she'd say, "Okay." Okay? Who knew that it would be that simple? And to think that I went 40 years before I clued in. So for all my former students who are watching right now, you know a little bit more about me. I'm a slow learner. Even though Charmaine retired in 2002, she never stopped working. She continued working with the local organizations of the deaf, doing bylaw amendments, literacy projects, and mentoring young deaf leaders, which was so, so important to her. She really had limitless energy for the people and things that mattered to her the most. I know we will all miss Charmaine, but we will never forget how she changed our lives for the better. I can honestly say that we are the lucky ones because we knew Charmaine.